that's the story, and I'm looking forward to all of our panels today, and particularly hearing about this really exciting tool on employer-assisted housing. Brittany Webb is going to lead a panel of experts here, and she's going to talk about a report that we are releasing today. Very exciting on the impact and of employer-assisted housing programs that are out there, how this works, and how we can use the need employers have to attract and retain employees to actually generate private sector down payment assistance that is not funded by the federal government. We'll take all the help we can get when it comes to down payment assistance. We've been very supportive of having significant investments by the federal government in DPA. Not sure what the reality of that is in the next 2 years, given the situation in Congress, the disagreements and partisanship, but employers have a direct and specific financial interest in providing this assistance themselves, and Brittany's going to tell us how. So with that, I think we're going to a break. Or are we coming up here? You guys are coming up here. We are not having a break. Don't go anywhere. And we're going to have a plenary session in here, and then we're going to have a break and go into our breakout room. So thank you all very much.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Brittany Webb. I am the Director of Research Conference. I'm going to make sure you guys can actually hear me. And as David said, I'm excited to launch a new report today on employer-assisted housing. This has been several months of work and research and talking to employers and seeing what is out there that has culminated into this final report. And after I present the report, we'll get into a discussion with my panelists to the left of me here. And that is going to be Leslie Winder, Director of Community and Economic Development at the Urban Affairs Coalition, and Jordan Klump, Business Relationship Manager at Live Baltimore. Both of them were extremely helpful in helping me to draft this report and understanding what their programs look like. And they will tell us a little bit more about that in just a few moments. If we can bring the report up, I'm happy to give everyone here a preview as we launch it on our website later this afternoon. Fantastic. So, for building employer-assisted housing programs. As David had mentioned, as we're coming out of a pandemic, a lot of people are no longer in their office spaces, and it's created interesting operations for more space. So one of the things that we wanted to think about and capture was how do we help different areas grow, and how do we help employers with finding and retaining talent. And the reason we are interested in employer-assisted housing in particular is because it offers this unified labor, transportation, and economic development all effectively. And if we could go to the next page, please. One more. And I think I'm getting in trouble.
Switch this out.
All right, sorry everyone. Is that better? Great. Okay, so just starting off with the basis of this report, in every state, employees and employers in a wide range, employees in a wide range of occupations cannot afford to buy a home of their own. As David just said, the skyrocketing housing prices make it very difficult for people of lesser or lower incomes to be able to afford home ownership in particular. And we all know that a down payment is a very real barrier for many of these people who otherwise could afford a mortgage payment. And recent reports that now most Americans spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So these housing costs can contribute to hiring challenges, especially in high-growth areas. At the end of 22, there were 11 million job openings in the US, with 4.1 million of those people voluntarily quitting their job. One study found that as many as 67% of employers reported that home prices and rental costs were contributing to their ability to recruit qualified candidates. So some of the most beneficial and effective employer-assisted housing programs that we were interested in looking at offer these certain kinds of down payment assistance. And that can be either in the form of a loan that is forgiven over a certain period of time. They range from 3 to 10 years, depending on what the employer decides. Or it could just be a bulk payment to help with the down payment at the beginning. The savings on the employer side can be made through any lost productivity, recruiting and training costs, which often can be 1.5 to 3 times the salary of an employee. And there's just the additional benefits that help with employee health, reduce commute times, reduce infrastructure impacts based on less cars on the road, less gas that contributes to emissions. And I do want to note that there are plenty of other versions of employer-assisted housing programs that can help with the supply side of things. That includes development projects, land donations, construction, things like the low-income housing tax credit. We did not look at those programs for the purposes of this report. I think everyone in this room can agree that financing affordable housing development is not always for the faint of heart, so we stuck with the low-cost loans and the direct cash assistance. So our argument is that a larger scope of employers should be considering employer-assisted housing as an opportunity to provide impactful benefits to their employees and a competitive advantage for employee retention. We know that employers don't typically engage in housing initiatives, but EAH would allow them to provide this non-traditional benefit to make housing affordability a reality for their employees and receive some benefits in return. So if we could go to the next page. And this toolkit we designed to really just be a starting point for employers that are interested in this type of program but don't know enough about it to figure out how they want to design their own program. They come in a very wide variety of program options, so it's really a means to help tailor your program for your individual needs of your employees and your employer itself. Just a little bit of background. So these employer-assisted housing programs were gaining some popularity before the Great Recession. There seemed to be a lot of interest around them, but not surprisingly, they very much fell out of practice after the housing crisis. So now we're in a place where we think this could be a very impactful method for people to start considering housing assistance again. And next page, please. I'll talk a little bit about case studies, but we'll talk a little bit more to my panelists here about their programs. So as I was doing my research, it was very clear that most of these employer-assisted housing programs are with anchor institutions, so places like universities, hospitals, governments, things like that. And we are very interested in seeing how private employers could also reap the benefits of employer-assisted housing. So the first case study I have on here is University of Southern California. They had the widest variety of different options for employer-assisted housing programs. So they had subsidy grants, they had a second mortgage option, they have short-term loan options, all of which were fantastic and tailored to their individual employees. This might not be ideal for all employers because, as with the variety of programs, they also needed more staff to be able to implement all of these different versions of their employer-assisted housing program. And they specifically also did most of their assistance through the paychecks of their employees. And one thing that we'll get into is talking about the tax implications of this. Most of these programs would be considered income for employees, and so they are taxed on any of the benefits, including the lump sum, depending on how it's set up. So that's just something important to consider. Next, please. And this just goes into detail about how USC specifically offers their process. You can go to the next one. Great. And we'll talk a little bit about Home Buy Now with Leslie on the side, but I did have great conversations with a group called SPIN that is a small nonprofit that is very active with their employer-assisted housing program, which for me was very important because it shows that even a smaller employer can in fact participate in this program and do it effectively and help have good impacts on their employees. Next slide, please. And just a letter came in from one of the recipients at SPIN Love for everybody to read that when the report comes out. It was just really nice to see that there are real people behind these numbers. Next slide, please. All right, and we'll hear more about live near your work from Baltimore in a few moments as well. Let's go to the next one. Great, and San Mateo County is another program that I spoke with. They have an employee down payment assistance program for their county and housing authority employees. And this one was interesting because it was not only created to help their employees afford housing within the expensive area, but they also had very long commute times that they were looking to reduce for their employees coming into work on a regular day. So an example, this particular program requires a 20% down payment with 3% provided by the employee and the remaining 17% by the program, not to exceed $100,000. This version, the loan is deferred for the first 5 years and amortized for 30 years at a 3% interest rate. The important aspect of that is they expect that around 2030, as people begin repaying their loans, the program could become self-funding. So that was an important thing to note if you're going down the loan route. I'll talk a little bit about University of Maryland, Baltimore. They had a very specific interest in community development, and that was very much woven throughout their program, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we talk about program design. And next slide, please. Next slide. I'm going to go to the recommended practices. Perfect, thank you. All right, so the big part of this toolkit is just a sort of step-by-step process of how to think about designing an employer-assisted housing program of your own. So I've divided it into about 6 steps. Step 1 is determining your employee need. As you're thinking about this, you need to make sure that you are answering any problems that your employees actually have. So you can do that by having a survey. You can do some local research on what your housing markets look like. You can figure out how long your employees are commuting to work. What does it cost to purchase a home near you? What does it cost to rent a home? And it just offers a series of key questions to ask yourself as you're thinking about designing the program. Next one, please. Step 2, we talk about determining your funding source. Not everyone will be able to self-fund a program. That's a reality that we will have to face with this. One of the opportunities here is having partners that are willing to help fund or match your grant. And we'll get into that a little bit more as well. But these matching sources can be really important for you. It can double the amount of a loan or down payment that you can offer your employees and really just help them stack up their benefits to be able to afford the home that they would like to purchase. Step 3 is designing your program structure. So this is when you would think about, do I want a direct grant for down payment assistance, forgivable loans, low interest loans? Consider if you want any options for rental assistance. There are people that are offering rent assistance to some of their employees, specifically if they're coming from out of town, out of county. Many people said that people were not willing to commit to purchasing a home in an area that they did not know yet. So some would offer rental assistance for the first year, and then that would convert into a home loan later on. This would help you determine the amount of benefit for everyone. We do recommend analyzing the local housing market and determining what an average 3% down payment would cost when you're thinking about how much you're going to offer. Next slide, please. Okay, and as I said, these employer-assisted housing programs are by no means one-size-fits-all. You should consider the ease of delivery when designing your program structure, the variety of ways that the available assistance can actually get to your employees, and how you want to fit them to your organizational needs and goals. Another thing to consider is there a time period that you want your employee to be with you before this benefit is offered? And this is another thing where you're going to need to consider the structure of your program and what goals you're trying to achieve. So if you're looking to attract new talent, maybe you don't want to have a very long time commitment, maybe the first 6 months, and then someone is eligible to receive this benefit. If you're looking to make your employee retention better, then maybe you have a program where you offer $50,000 at the beginning and $10,000 is forgiven each year. With the contingency that the employee is staying with the company. So some key questions are listed there as well. You also want to consider any restrictions as far as, is there a geographic area that the home must be purchased within? Are there income limits that you want for the employees that are eligible for this program? Do you want to make sure they're a first-time home buyer? Just a list of different ways that you can approach this. Housing counseling, homeownership education was another thing that came up several times. Next slide, please. So step 4 is establishing your program processes. I won't get too detailed into that, but you need to think about documentation, what your employment needs are for the person that's actually administering the program, how the selection process is going to go. Do you want to use a lottery system? Is it first come, first served? There were a lot of different ways that different employers were approaching this. And then step 5 is connecting with partners. We'll talk about partnerships in a little bit more detail, but this can be very imperative when you're thinking about specific community development initiatives. If there are certain areas that you want your employees to be living, making sure that those areas are opportunities of growth. And next slide, please. And step 6, which was not in my original plan, but after talking to many people was added, is just implementation and marketing. I learned very quickly that these programs are only as powerful as the people that are actually implementing them. They can very easily be brushed aside just due to competing priorities of different HR departments. So marketing them and marketing them effectively and creating a word of mouth strategy within your employees can be a very powerful way of making sure people know this program is available to them. And there's a little bit on rent assistance options. Didn't cover that as much just because we know that there are other federal programs that are addressing this, but a little bit of information about rent assistance options as well. Next slide. All right, and so David mentioned a couple of the benefits already, but reducing turnover rates was the #1 reason that people are interested in these programs. So some of these studies, you know, in Fannie Mae that pioneered EAH in 1991 saw its turnover go from 25% to single digits after implementing this program. Another study saw that Aurora Medical Center saw its turnover fall from 14.5% to 5.3% among the employees using EAH. So it is a very powerful tool in retaining employees. There is also a potential for net zero cost if this is designed effectively. As we talk about the turnover cost, investing in your employees does save you money in the long run if you are being very intentional about it. So there's some information in there. And then just fostering homeownership opportunities. We're all here to talk about housing. We know the benefits of homeownership, and we know how it can help your individual employees. And then lastly, leveraging these diverse policy initiatives. EAH encourages access to housing and housing options within areas of opportunity for employment and unites housing and labor goals for communities, which we know when those two things are taken together, it can just double the impact across the board. Next slide. Higher employee productivity and morale, and we talked about the environmental impact being reduced as well. And next slide, please. Just to go over the challenges very briefly, the first challenge is scalability. You know, when you're giving bulk payments of anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 to your employees, we understand that that's not always a scalable thing to do for many employers. So it's not unheard of that many of these programs only serve a dozen people a year. Which doesn't mean that it's not working, because it is working for those dozen people. But this is something to consider when we're talking about building out these programs. Tax implications, as I said, many of these programs show up as income on the employee's tax returns. So seeing that tax bill can be intimidating for someone. And one of the solutions that many people had was spreading that tax liability over 5-year periods, whatever the established time frame is. So that will lessen the hit for the individual employee. And then marketing is another challenge, which we'll get into with the panel. Next slide. All right, and lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about policy options. So we recommend addressing these negative tax incentives. This can make sure that the actual down payment or the payment that the employee gets is the full payment. So if you're offering $10,000, they get $10,000. So figuring out a way to avoid those negative tax outcomes is imperative to helping these programs grow and be successful. In addressing scalability, we'll talk a little bit about pooling implementation systems. Some cities have sort of centralized EAH or Live Near You Work systems that offer technical assistance and matching dollars to employers that are offering employer-assisted housing to their employees. And some of these centralized systems can be very encouraging. It helps smaller businesses get involved, and it just provides some assistance for them as well when they're doing their setup. And then lastly is just investing in EAH. Not surprisingly, as with most things, there's a lack of data around these specific programs, particularly for private employers. Not many people are interested in talking about their turnover rates. which is fair, I understand that. But getting a comprehensive study and having a better understanding of where all of these programs are existing and how well they're working would of course be helpful in helping us to grow and make them much more effective and impactful. All right, so I will conclude the report presentation and let's get into some discussion. All right, and so Leslie, I'm gonna start with you, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. So I'm Director of Community and Economic Development at Urban Affairs Coalition. And obviously, we're there to build bridges between our banking and financial institutions and our low and moderate income communities. I facilitate the CED committee for Urban Affairs Coalition. So it's leading the committee and their work, and that leads to the programs and services that are developed by UAC. Do you want me to talk about the program?
Yes, please.
So we administer a EHA that's called Home Buy Now. The funding for this comes from both the City of Philadelphia DHCD, and the bulk of it is really from PHFA, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, through a FAIR grant. FAIR is, I always forget, but I think it's Pennsylvania Housing, Affordability, and Rehabilitation something with an E.
No one's correcting you.
The Home Buy Now program, as we know, is, because I'm here, an employer-assisted housing program. The key to being eligible for this program, the number one key, is that your employer is offering a housing benefit. So whenever we get calls that are not directly from an organization or company, and they say they understand we've got a housing grant, the first question is, who do you work for, and does your organization offer a housing benefit? If they are not already part of our network and offer a housing benefit that we aren't aware of it, then it's very easy for them to join right in. This is a quick, MOU that we offer. If the organization does not offer a housing benefit, but they think that the HR department might be amenable to conversations about it, then we start those conversations, going through very much of what you described in engaging them and talking about the benefits of having an employer-assisted housing program. We work with organizations in structuring it, but we really don't have any say in how they structure. And we don't care so much how they structure. For us, the end result is you have a program. The eligibility, as I said, number one is that your employer is offering that. It's 115% of AMI, so there is an income guideline on our side, again, not necessarily the organization side. And the home is being purchased in the city, within the city of Philadelphia. Again, for the organization, they may have different criteria. They may allow outside of the city of Philadelphia. They may restrict it to a catchment area. A lot of our anchor institutions do that. Again, how they structure the program is not so much our concern. It's working with them so that they at least getting that information out to the employee. It's really pretty simple. It is a matching grant of up to $4,000. I'd say our average over the course of a year probably trends somewhere in the $3,000 range. Many, I'd say even most of our organizations, their grants or forgivable loans that they are offering for their employees is somewhere in the $2,000 or $4,000 range. The anchor institutions tend to be very high, or much higher. Our university, we've got at least one university that offers $15,000. But again, restricted to an area that specific catchment area. You've got to stay employed by the organization for, I think it might be up to 10 years for the forgivable loan. We match up to that $4,000.
Thank you. Jordan, you want to talk a little bit more?
Sure, I'd love to. And I just want to say, Brittany, thanks so much. This is wonderful and important event. So my name is Jordan Klump. I'm the business relationship manager for an organization called Live Baltimore. We are an independent nonprofit in Baltimore City, and our mission is to attract and retain more folks to come be our neighbors in Baltimore. So that puts us in a pretty unique and valuable position to work with both the City of Baltimore in helping to market their homeownership incentives and to support with administering those incentives, but also to be the bridge to private employers that are hoping to offer these EAH, alphabet soup, programs. So we are just well positioned to support employers into helping them get these programs off the ground, and then as well to help them follow through with them and administer in the day-to-day. So Baltimore's Live Near Your Work program is our employer-assisted housing program. Much like Home Buy Now, it is a matching program between private companies, private employers, and the city of Baltimore. So on the city side, the city's going to match between $1,000 and $2,500 as a straight-up grant for any participating employer. To be a participating employer and live near your work, there's only one requirement, and that's you have to have office space in Baltimore City within the city limits. And that's it. Beyond that, you are eligible to apply to get signed up as an approved employer, and then any amount that you offer to your employees between $1,000 and up to $2,500 will be matched by the city of Baltimore as a grant. Now, on the employer side, there is a ton of flexibility to build these programs to suit your business goals. Brittany mentioned a lot of really great factors and things to consider when you're building your program, but that's up to the employer, and that's up to what their goals are. Do they want to restrict it to certain neighborhoods or geographic areas to support community development in those areas? Is it more a talent acquisition piece where it's citywide, or it's a larger geographic area, but it's a benefit that you promote when you're seeking top talent? Supporting first-time home buyers, limiting to income, whatever you want to do, it's kind of up to you as the employer to build that out. But the employer would participate in the program, choose their criteria, and then the city of Baltimore matches up to $2,500.
Fantastic, thank you. So I guess I'll start with just a quick question of, say an employer is interested, they call you. What are your kind of top line starting points explaining why this program benefits them?
Well, you've named a number of them. It's employee retention is certainly a start. It could be employee attention in trying to, or recruitment. But that is, we talk about the same reason any of their other benefits, employee benefits, are structured and offered, what that does for the employee itself, how they begin to feel about the organization they work for, supported and valued by that organization. So those are the top level points that we.
Yeah, thankfully, when new employers call, it's never been a tough sell. These programs are always provide a lot of benefits that we just mentioned. Another big one is that you've got your folks living closer to your business. That helps for turnover rates. That also helps for getting people back in the office, which may be a challenge for some businesses post-pandemic where work from home has kind of taken off. But if you feel you would value having your employees in the office more frequently, having them live down the block is some strong medicine to encourage them to make the commute. So that's another benefit I like to mention.
And specifically, how does the partnership with either of your organizations help with the individual employers? Jordan, I know you talked a little bit about kind of the ad hoc employees that find the program and their employer maybe forgot they were part of it. Maybe talk about that for just a second.
Yeah, that happens more often than you think. It's competing priorities in HR, like you mentioned, but sometimes businesses that are already participating kind of forget that they do this. And so it brings up a good point that I think employees often are the catalysts and the champions of these programs, both for employers that are already participating, but also for new employers to sort of spur on and encourage an employer to create a program. Having an employee that knows the city's going to match X dollars helps with that. So yes, employees do reach out to us directly, and we're happy to talk them through what the program could look like, and then from there it often leads to very productive, valuable conversations with the employer, and in many cases successful programs that are launched.
Yeah, we have a similar kind of thing where, particularly if there's been any turnover in the HR department, they may not even aware that, oh, this is something that we actually offer, because the request or the inquiry might come directly from the employee. Those might be for some of our larger partners, but we've got other partners there where the HR is actively involved, promoting on a regular basis, and then working with their employees rather, on the initial paperwork and guiding them through the process, so they actually end up becoming our primary contact as we're administering the grant.
Yeah, I was able to talk to Spin, one of those employers, and they do something interesting where their employer-assisted housing program is not run through their HR department because of these competing priorities. They do it from the actual corporate office, and they think of it as a very intentional way to show their employees that this is a program that they are not only interested in, but they're very supportive of. And it helps them to be a very successful EAH program despite being a smaller employer. Do you want to talk about Spin for just a second?
They're amazing. As I said, smaller organization, smaller nonprofit, but I think over half of our grants awarded each year come from Spin, and their employees tend to have a much lower income level. They are, we said, great partners. They've been really receptive to working with us, helping other organizations go through a similar process. When Urban Affairs Coalition is an employee partner, so we offer an EAHA as part of our benefits. And as our HR department was figuring out how to get it set up, I said, let me introduce you to Mindy at Spin, and she can tell you what they're doing. Again, not necessarily what we might roll out, but get some ideas about how to market it, how to structure it. It's been a wonderful partnership with them.
And I think it's just really important to acknowledge that because, seeing the numbers for $10,000 down payment assistance can be a very scary number for an employer to hear, but it doesn't always have to be that big. It doesn't have to be an anchor institution providing a $100,000 second mortgage. Sometimes the $2,000 with a matching $2,000 grant is enough to be impactful for your employees.
Exactly.
And I was also, I was able to talk to the city of Baltimore, and they had noted that their program essentially pays for itself in the return property taxes. And that was a very important piece of information to hear, that, for them, for the price of the homes that were generally being sold with these employer-assisted housing programs, they had a full return on their investment. The only cost was the cost of the salary for the employee that runs the program. So let's talk maybe a little bit about equity. Are these programs available to or able to kind of contribute to equity and community development efforts?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Especially with some of the anchor institutions that Leslie mentioned. We have a similar type of engagement with our program as well, where we have community businesses, like for us, it's Johns Hopkins and University of Maryland, Baltimore, some of the larger medical systems that are really taking charge on these programs and offering a larger sum, but limiting it to specific neighborhood tracts, limiting it to specific areas that they have a vested interest in and are aimed at community development. So their programs are focused on bolstering these different areas, these communities. You can get sometimes $17,000 in down payment assistance through this program, but you got to buy within our neighborhoods and support the communities that we are a part of. So I think it's been a very effective tool. It's widely used by their employees, and we've seen great returns on investing in those communities.
Yeah, and the same with us. It's it tends to be the larger anchor institutions that are doing that. The universities we partner with, Temple, UPenn, Drexel, St. Joe's, are all offering something along similar programs with varying criteria for eligibility. Obviously, the networks or the neighborhoods and the dollar amount may vary, but they're looking to have a direct impact on their communities where their business is based.
Mm-hmm.
And for those types of community development initiatives, it's obviously important to have partners within your local community and make sure that you are tracking the impact of your program. When I was speaking to University of Maryland, Baltimore, they had noted that they keep very detailed records, and they were able to maintain all the same population diversity numbers were the exact same for their program as they were for the community before the program was initiated. So that can be helpful in limiting displacement for these programs, because that's another criticism that we face when we're talking about development. So. I think it just reiterates that when you're designing these, you have to be intentional and you have to be tracking what you're doing.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about challenges. So what are some of the challenges that you guys face in just your daily job?
For us, it's really uncovering those employers that offer the benefit. I mean, it's not like you can Google that information.
I tried.
I think I've tried as well. So it is a lot of word of mouth. It is kind of dialing for dollars, doing a solicitation calls just to find out who is out there that is doing this, are offering these kinds of programs. Trying to maybe tap into your local SHRM chapter. SHRM is the Society of Human Resource Managers, but if you can tap into that somehow to at least get the word out that this program is available if you offer this, so that will help to uncover those employees. But I think that that's the number one challenge for us, followed right behind that with marketing, because it's the chicken and egg. So if we do a wide-scale marketing of the program, we'll open up the floodgates of everyone looking for a matching grant of this kind. But we've got to then stop and say, we've got to have your employer on board. And the buy-in for an employer is $500. So someone can offer a benefit as low as $500 to their employees. That qualifies you to be or participate in the Home Buy Now program. And then we will match that $500. So maybe that's not a lot, but $1,000 going to the table with, versus not having that extra $1,000 can certainly make a difference for a number of people.
Sure, yeah, I would agree 100%. And just marketing the programs, letting employers know that this is available and getting new employers to sign up is really important, and that's a challenge because many local Baltimore employers, don't know about Live Near Your Work. We are fortunate to have many that do, and over 100 that participate with us, but getting people to sign on and just letting them know that this program exists is a challenge that we work to solve every day. And then also, helping to market the program to employees as well. Some organizations do a great job of marketing their own programs and being available for their employees and just making sure that's known. Some do not. Some participating employers need some help with marketing, and we've had some home buyers that will be working for a participating employer say, oh, I had no idea. I didn't know this was an option for me. So marketing piece on both ends is an important component.
And how about funding? Any challenges there?
That's always going to be always a challenge. You said currently the program, when it started, and this started in the early 2000s, and I don't remember the date. I've only been with the organization for a year, so that's more of my institutional knowledge. But when it first started, I think it was more heavily funded by the city in terms of the grant disbursement. That funding went away at some time and came back on board, I think, in 2019. As I said, it is through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, but we can't rely 1,000% on that. So when that is tapped out, we look to, as a matter of fact, just recently submitted for a new funding grant. And it just, cross your fingers that you can keep the program going.
Yes, funding, of course, is an issue. There's unfortunately not an unlimited amount of funding for our program. Live Near Your Work on the Baltimore City Match side does have a limited amount of awards. They do refresh twice a year, and it is on a first-come, first-serve basis.
Yeah, and a lot of the programs that I talked to during my research had said, typically every year the funding runs out at some point. So most people were operating on that first-come, first-serve basis. One group I talked to did a lottery system, which was interesting, where they would draw 5 names per quarter, and then the recipient would have 6 months or a year to be able to actually find a home to put the down payment on. So people are kind of approaching the funding issue with different strategies to try and help alleviate it. What about roadblocks as far as tax implications? And I know no one up here is a tax specialist, so we're not offering any tax advice, but it is something that came up several times, specifically when talking about the employee having to pay back those taxes when it comes up as income.
So ours is a grant, and those funds are dispersed directly to the title company at settlement. So there aren't any tax implications for our grants. On the employee side, how they get their funds from the employee employer rather, might be a little bit different. Most of ours, again, tend to be either grants or forgivable loans. So I don't think they have the same kind of tax implication, but luckily that is not really a consideration for on our end. I don't know about yours.
Yeah, so tax was my worst subject in school. So I'm not going to pretend like I could give you tax advice on how to structure your programs. But I can say that some of our anchor institutions that offer a larger sum kind of make that known at the jump. Like, here's the base amount, here's what it's going to be after taxes. But in terms of how to structure it, I don't have a great answer for you.
It all depends on how the funds are awarded.
Yeah, and it of course depends per state, county. Everyone's got their own set of rules to follow. But I think hearing that there are ways that you can kind of manage this and lessen the tax implication would be helpful. And of course, we would like to advocate for ways to make it even more impactful so that you get the true benefit of the program and not necessarily the taxed version of it. In talking to some of the people that were running these programs, a few people did say that seeing the taxes taken out of an employee's paycheck, if that's the way that you're delivering your grant amount, was enough to make some people back out of the program, just because that additional tax implication was very intimidating. So something important to think about. So let's maybe switch gears into what are the incentives for cities, local governments, or nonprofits to become involved with you as partners?
You mentioned a big one with the city of Baltimore, and most of the time for these transactions, they've recouped their investment at closing, or by the time the transfer and recordation taxes are filed. So it's really a win-win for everybody. But of course, the bigger benefit than that is you get more people living in the city, paying taxes, being engaged in the communities. It's a small amount of money to invest, to have a great return, both monetary and otherwise.
Yeah. Contributing to the tax base, it is all significant for the municipalities.
And in working with all of your kind of different employers, since you both have plenty of different versions of this, what are some of the differences between the programs that are maybe structured as community development initiatives versus the programs that are structured for employee retention and attraction?
The differences are really in the dollar amount. They're much higher for those that are using it as employee attraction, recruitment. They're offering some pretty big dollars. As said, Drexel, I think, is $15,000 for a very specific area. For our smaller partners, it's usually, it could be $2,000, and there's not a lot of other criteria. They look at this solely as a benefit to retain and reward their employees.
Yes, I agree. Our experience is very similar, where if you're taking a community development approach with these awards, they tend to be geographically restricted to neighborhood tracts or catchment areas where you are more interested in investing in these particular communities. There also are sometimes additional criteria, requirements that are put on the award itself on the employer side. Now, as more a talent acquisition award or employee benefit award, we see that if that is the main focus, it tends to be wider geographic scope, and again, fewer strings attached on the actual employer award, because you want your employees to be able to use it. If it's a universal benefit, it's for that purpose. You want to make sure that they can get the money.
And talking about strings attached and sort of the structure of these programs, I mentioned a few of the different ways that people structure them. Are there any that I didn't cover, maybe, that you all have seen when people are building these programs?
One interesting idea was one of our employers has a sort of a different approach, different dollar amounts based on being a first-time home buyer and then move-up buyers. So first-time home buyers are supported at a higher level than move-up buyers. And I thought that was an interesting approach.
Yeah, I haven't seen any structuring, anything like that, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
And talking about first-time home buyers as well, we know that home ownership and just the whole system of finding a home, purchasing, can be a very daunting and intimidating process for first-time home buyers. especially if you're just not accustomed to the buying process at all, if your parents may not necessarily own a home. So how can employers and partners like you help those potential buyers navigate this process?
Well, certainly, promoting home buyer education, and a number of them, because they are first-time home buyers, are participating in some kind of housing counseling. And what's great about that is that you're able to leverage and layer dollars that you might get from those programs. So, for example, one of the first UAC employees that was eligible came to us, and she's getting $2,000 from the organization. She's getting $2,000 from the program, Home Buy Now. But she was also, because she went through housing counseling, she was eligible for $10,000 as a first-time home buyer in Philadelphia. So all of a sudden, she's going to the table with $14,000. It is great to be able to tout those stories and make sure that people are aware of other programs that are out there and available that they can layer with this.
Absolutely. Yeah, home buyer education is critical. It's required for all of the Baltimore City incentives, but it's an important piece to make sure that first-time buyers are educated and sort of know what they're getting into and have all the information up front, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and several of the programs that I talked to did require some kind of homeownership counseling, home buyer education programs. Some had specific requirements that it was a HUD-approved counseling agency. Some did not. That's just another way to think about how you're allowing your employees to succeed in this program and make sure that the homeownership is sustainable. The kind of other side of this is thinking about what to do if your employee quits the company, if there are layoffs, if maybe something they get behind on their mortgage, and there's a couple pieces in the toolkit that just tell you to think about that kind of thing. We don't want to make any programs that are not sustainable, especially for first-time home buyers, and homeownership education and counseling is definitely a very important part of making sure that we're not contributing to those overall problems. Okay, so in that same kind of realm, you don't typically hear about these programs for lower and moderate income groups. And we talked a lot about marketing today and talking about how to market these programs to those groups that probably need this assistance more so than others. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how to direct the marketing there. Is that something that you all can have experience with your employers?
Not so much on my end,
Well, Live Baltimore, part of our mission is to support LMI areas in Baltimore City. A lot of our buyers are LMI buyers, and a lot of our neighborhoods are in LMI census tracts. So I would say that our overall education program geared towards those audiences helps. And, of course, we have people that we work with every day that fall into that category, and we educate them about live near your work, but also the other wonderful homeownership incentives available in Baltimore City.
Yeah, and that's the same for us. And again, I talked about that kind of the chicken and egg. If we do broad, wide-scale marketing for Home Buy Now, we got to make sure that the message is in there somewhere and preface it by saying that your employer needs to be a part of the program.
And several of the programs that I talked to had mentioned, if they had just initially launched a program within recent years, they would get kind of the floodgate of interested applicants at the beginning. And it was definitely more of a process at launch, and then it would eventually kind of taper off and trickle down. And it seems to me that once that floodgate is kind of gone and the tapering has happened, that's probably the most important part to start thinking about your marketing strategies.
But I'm, you were presenting the toolkit. I'm looking at that as a great marketing opportunity for us, because again, we're trying to get to those employers. So now I have not only everything that we've already presented, but look, I've got this, I've got this study that was done. So being able to use that as a tool for us in marketing and getting the message out to more employers, I think is great.
And again, employees are a great marketing tool.
Yes.
If employees are champions of these programs and coming to the employer, coming to their HR department with a dream to get one of these established at their company, it goes a long way.
Yeah, great advocates.
And that speaks a lot to the idea of attracting new employees as well. If you have an employee-driven program, then that definitely shows a certain amount of I care about my employees and I'm going to listen and help establish this program. So let's talk maybe a little bit about just how to make these programs bigger, better, more efficient. What are some of the ideas you have or think could be helpful to either make these more popular with employers or just make them work more efficiently?
I think that, getting in front of employers and explaining the benefits and, talking them through what can be achieved from a business perspective through these programs is big. I think that working with community organizations, local nonprofits, and other community groups goes a long way for helping to market these programs and also ramp them up so we see more use and ultimately more use means more interest, means growing. So those are two things that come to the top of mind.
So similar to employees being advocates, employers within their market, within their industry, can be the same kind of testimonial salespeople, if you will. I often, when I am talking to a potential new employer, I reference the other organizations that we work with, particularly the smaller ones, because if there's any overlap or synergies between those two, they go, oh, well, I should reach out to them. Like if they can do it, then I'm sure there's a way that we can structure the same kind of thing. So using them in the same way that the employees are salespeople.
And the power of partnerships and kind of breaking down those silos is, I think, important across most of the housing world, but particularly for this, and especially when you're talking about private employers that aren't necessarily talking to each other all the time, the way that some of these community development organizations are. As part of the toolkit, one of the first things we recommend is calling up your community organizations and calling up your local governments and cities to see if they even have one of these programs, because, as you said, a lot of employers just don't even know that this exists. So breaking down those silos and talking to each other is definitely a good way to start. We are happy to take some questions from the audience if anyone has any. Yep. I've got my mic person in the back. So please feel free to just raise your hand and she will come over and we are happy to answer questions. And while everyone is thinking about that, let's, in the same subject as partnerships, how can these partnerships kind of help to build and uplift the different employer-assisted housing programs?
I mean, I think it's just the added support too, and promotion, if you will, of EAH, and because a lot of people, even on the business side, aren't aware that they can do something like that. And so having another employer partner kind of walk them through how it worked for them, the benefits that they're getting, and ideas about structuring, I think is, helps to support us.
Sure. I would just add to that and say that, it's part of our job. It's part of my job. It's part of Leslie's job to make sure that these programs succeed, to help you, to be a resource for you any way that we can, whether that's, consulting on how to structure the program. We're happy to be a part of those conversations. We're happy to provide you with data, neighborhood data, thinking through, what do the numbers look like and what can be the most effective use of your dollars. And then just generally, any help that you need, working with a community organization that is taking charge on these programs is going to be a huge benefit to employers.
Hello. Okay. Hey, Niles from Nesmith. I had a question. Just curious. Well, thank you again. You've inspired a lot of thoughts that are going on. I came from San Francisco, which is a very expensive place to live. Obviously, a lot of layoffs recently too, and thinking a lot about employment assistance and housing kind of in that area as well. Has there been any models around potentially co-ownership models for employees to come together and maybe own a multifamily building or own a building of some nature together? And if so, have you seen any of those in your research, either Brittany or for you all to, we just saw that presentation where it takes twice as much salary, and so can we alter the demand side of that equation and have people pair or partner as well?
So I'll start with that. I did not find any in my research, but that is not to say they don't exist. I think, as we've all kind of said, it is strangely difficult to find out who is doing these programs. A lot of the time, it's only going to show up in the materials of an actual benefits package that's going to the employers, or excuse me, the employees, and is not necessarily published online. So I didn't come across any, but you know, these are structured to fit the needs of your employees. So you could definitely make one that would that would fit those specific needs. And
Staff were going in on a place together, so that's why I was thinking about it. But is that a model that potentially works?
sure. Yeah, I don't see why not. I'll call you and find out how it went.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Oh, we'll do Caitlin, and then we'll go here. I lied. I'll get you after.
We're so polite. Good morning. Hay Pinham with Faith and Community Empowerment. We run a housing counseling agency out of Los Angeles. And this conversation triggered a thought was that I know many of our banking partners invest significantly into our city down payment assistance program that could give up to $140,000 in LA. But LA is a very expensive market, right? But it just dawned on me that I don't think that these employers, especially the banks, have their own employee program. So they're investing into a pool, but perhaps they haven't considered having, you know, a separate pool for their own employees to then to leverage as well. So I just wanted to ask, you know, have you had those kind of conversations or experiences, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm actually in conversation now with a lending institution about, they're very interested in doing it and just trying to figure out what it looks like for them and how to, if they can administer it. It's a large national bank, so it's not, you know, they're looking at a local market. There are a lot of steps that they have to go through, and probably there's some regulatory issues that might arise. But the fact that we're even having the conversation is great.
So if I was to have those conversations with our financial institutions who are investing in the city program, who would I call? Would it be, hey, look at the the publication today, or call you guys, or what would be kind of a start for them that I should suggest or recommend?
Yeah, definitely send them the toolkit. That's a good starting point, and you know, just generating the interest, I think, is step one, and figuring out, are they willing to structure this? Are they willing to have this conversation, and go from there.
Do you know how long that process could take in terms of structuring it?
That is an excellent question.
I mean, I think it's up to the organization. I mean, the larger, more bureaucratic, if you will, organization, the longer it is likely to take versus a small business or a small nonprofit organization that, you know, is making their own decisions for their own, you know, very select group of employees. It just depends.
I have more questions, but I'll pass on to the next person.
Hi, Brittany. Caitlin Harris-Walker with the Mortgage Bankers Association. We know that housing is so expensive, and so people move farther and farther out. And transportation, public transportation, is so incredibly important, and to be near public transportation to get into your office. Are you seeing that as you're providing these sort of fundings to your employees, that they're actually moving closer to their office?
So one pilot study was done here in DC, actually, and they had an interesting structure where they the requirements for the home being purchased would be within, I think it was like a mile or 2 miles of a specific university campus, or within half a mile of a metro stop, or a quarter mile within a bus route. So when you're talking about the transit-oriented programs, there are kind of different ways you can approach it, as far as, do they need to be within walkable distance? Do they need to have a bus, metro, that sort of thing? The distance that people would move, kind of varied from the people that were able to give me that information. So a lot of these anchor institutions that are able to offer the larger benefits would see the out-of-state moves coming in. For some of the smaller companies, then it was largely people moving from maybe outside the city lines into the city lines, which is a big deal for some cities because I think people can be intimidated, again, by city taxes and the idea behind that. So it kind of depends program to program and how it was structured, but yeah, I mean, I think if you offer the benefit in an amount that is enough to encourage someone to move across state lines, yes. But a lot of the time, it might just be someone coming, 15 to 20 minutes closer to work. And someone, as we talk about kind of down payment assistance too, one of the questions that that I got the other day when we were talking about this is, why is this different than, say, offering somebody a $40,000 signing bonus? Why does it matter that it's going towards a down payment on a house? And I think the important thing to think about there is this idea of community development and investing back in the actual structure of the community. If you're giving someone a $40,000 signing bonus, that's fantastic, but that might not necessarily go anywhere that's going to generate new income for the town, for the community that you're living in. If you're investing in housing, then you have a much better chance of having these successful community development initiatives that really allow an employer to say, I care about the space that I am in and the way that my employees are interacting with the community around me.
Hi, Jason Bosek from Vested Communities. We're a housing impact fund. We've got a fractional equity model, so Niles, the co-investment model makes sense to us. Quick question for the panel. We're actually doing our first proof of concept in Baltimore, so Jordan would love to connect after, but have any of the panelists explored an equity model in the down payment assistance where instead of it being debt, a loan, forgivable loan, it's actually a co-investment of equity to help impact affordability and make these units more affordable for prospective homeowners?
I am not aware of that in Baltimore. It's an interesting concept, and yes, please give me a call. Love to connect. No, I don't think we have that currently.
Yeah, I know in Philadelphia, I'm not familiar with anything like that.
Yeah, nor am I, but I'm definitely going to explore more and do some deeper dives into the ideas of co-investment and see if there's a way for this to overlap. I'm sure there is. We just have to figure out how to do it. All right, I think that we are good. Any kind of final concluding thoughts that you all have before we?
No, just talk it up. That's kind of how this thing happens, and people start thinking like, oh, I never thought about that. That's a great idea. If you happen to be talking to anybody in the Philadelphia region, please send them our way.
Yes, I would echo that. These programs are awesome. They're some of my favorite down payment assistance out there just because they benefit so many different stakeholders in the transaction. It's great for you and your business. It's great for employees. It's great for the governments. And so, please consider it. And yes, if you're in the Baltimore market, give me a call. I'd love to connect.
And we will be publishing the report today, as we said. It's also going to be on the app and website that was developed specifically for this event. So in the What to Know Before You Go email you all got, you should have the information for that if you'd like to take a look at it. And otherwise, yeah, if you're interested, definitely give me a call. I'm happy to talk about this more. And thank you, everyone, for allowing us to talk about this today.
Thank you, Brittany. That was fabulous. Appreciate it. The EAH toolkit is on the homepage of nhc.org. So if you go there, right at the top, you can click on it and get a copy of the toolkit. And then we're going to take a 15-minute break or a 10-minute break till 10:45 a.m. when we're going to start our 2 concurrent sessions. Molding the homeownership message for millennials and Gen Zs in the Holman Lounge, and a how-to guide to coalition building in the First Amendment Lounge. So thank you all. They're right over here to your left, my right.